Welcome to the another video on Spring Cloud Kubernetes series, and in this video we will explore the flight service. The flight service is a microservices. Till now whatever we have done like API gateway, then config server, Eureka server, these are the Spring Cloud application. And now this microservice that we are, this is the actual applications that we want to deploy. So first of all, let us look into the microservices. So there are three microservices we are going to use: flight service, passenger service, and the ticket service. These three microservices are very similar. The approach to develop that services are very similar. They are very simple applications. So if I look at the POM file of microservice, here I have the HUA dependency, then there is a JPA dependency as well, and web starter dependencies. I also have used the H2 database for in-memory database, and I have used some Lombard for some adding some the auto generated property files like getter setters and everything. And then I am also using the Guava for some precondition check. And then I also want to fetch the properties from a Spring Cloud configurations that we already deployed here. So what it will do is it will fetch some of the properties, like if I have got a dev profile, then it will fetch some of the properties of the H2 database, then database connectivity, then JPA dependency, then also the Eureka, from where to fetch the properties. All this information it will fetch from the config server. Again, let us go back and check how the project is been organized. So there is a controller, the flight controller, which is using some of the dependencies that we have defined into the flight service, like it is using the active profile, that we are defining here. Then it is using the data source URL that is been defined here, data source URL. Then the data source username, that is also getting from the here, this property file. Also I have exposed some the URIs, like active profile, that fetching all the flights that are already I have registered with the H2 database, then fetching the flight with the flight number, then getting the flight information from to, and you also can provide the date. Also, if I want to add a new flight, I should be able to add the flight. If I want to update the flights, I should be able to update the flights. Okay, then there is a controller advice class, and here I have put all the common exceptions handling mechanism here. So for example, the custom exception, illegal argument exception, and if other than these two exceptions are happening, it will be catch right here. So also I have defined a custom exception class here, so you can add message exception and HTTP status code. Then before we look into the model, repo and services, let us go and check. I have two one data.sql and schema.sql. In the schema.sql, I have defined the table, right? So flight table with the ID, flight name, capacity, from station to station, and arriving detail. These are the columns of the tables. And while starting the applications, I want to insert some data, minimum data, so that I can fetch while application gets started. So I am using few like insert script, so flight number, then capacity, all this. So some of the information will get added here. So when my application start, these many flights automatically get added. Then now let us go back into the model. So to replicate all the tabled information similar to that one, I have created entity class with a lombok. I am adding the getter setters and also the table name, and this is also defined as a entity. Then this is my id, the flight number, the same one that I have defined here, flight number, then the capacity, then from station to station, and all the fields that already defined there. Then there is the flight repo. The flight repo is fetching all the flights, to fetch the detail from the database, right? Then there is a flight service. The flight service is something that will directly fetch the detail from the repo, like get flight by the flight number, right? Then get the flight, add a new flight. If I want to add a new flight, I will first check whether flight number is available or not. If not, if available, then I will add this flight details right here. And to check about some preconditions I also have added. For example, let's say I want to add the flight, right? So initially I will check whether flight number is null. It should not be null, then flight number should not be null. So I want some basic data to be added, and if these informations are not available, then I will throw the exception and I will not be able to fetch those details. I will not be able to add the flight number or fetch the details. So this is like very simple project I have created, and let us try to check how to create the manifest file, Kubernetes deployment and service manifest file for this particular project. Let us look at the manifest file for flight service. So here again initial information is same for the deployment object, kind is deployment, and metadata, the name of the service is ticket service, flight service deployment, then metadata label is TS, flight service deployment, then the replica is 1, and selector match label is ticket service, flight service, and also the same name I am using it inside the template metadata label. Now inside the specs, again I have got a specs, and there is a container details. So here the name of the container that I am going to create is ticket service, flight service. Image is cup of Java Tech, flight service v1, and the image pull policy is always, the port it is exposing is 8100. So if we look at the port, I can go into the this I think here 8100, right? So the port it is exposing is 8100, but what will happen is we are also registering our microservice with API gateway, so Eureka server, and we also have API gateway running, so we can access this microservice directly through API gateway as well. We also have kept it so that we also should be able to access the API using the 8100 as well. But generally in the Spring Cloud, when we are running, we may not be able to we like disable accessing the API directly. Now Spring application name, the name of the application is flight application name. So we have to add this into the config map because our config map doesn't contain this information. So I will add this information here. Okay, here is the name that I have added. Now I should be able to fetch this information. Okay, so application config map flight application name. So from here it will fetch the application name. Now another property is Spring profile active. So this is already defined into the Spring profile active. So what will happen is from the application config map it will fetch this information. So again in the service URL default zone we already have defined into the config map. So this is why we have defined all these common properties into the config map, so that all the microservice should be able to use. So we don't need to define again and again. So if some property value gets changed, so we change at one place and it will get reflected at all the places. Okay, so again client service, this is I think I did have done 2 times. No, I think this is correct. Then Spring config import, again this is used at a multiple places, right? So I have defined into the config map. So this is like Spring config import. So this is done. So this is all about the deployment object. And the service object is ticket service, flight service, service name is this, and the selector is ticket service, flight service. This is the same as the match labels, right? Here is a match labels. This is what we are using here, exposing with the port 8100 and the target port is 8100. So this is all about the deployment object and the service object. Now let us deploy this manifest file, but as we already have updated the config map, so we need to deploy that first, right? So what we'll do is kubectl apply -f and we will update the config map. So it got updated and the new entry that we have added, flight application name, got added. Now we will kubectl, we will deploy a flight service. Okay, so let us see that got deployed or not. Okay, so my flight service also got deployed. Now let us go to the Postman and check it that all the services we are able to fetch the details or not. So we have got API gateway also got registered. So first of all let us check in the browser that it got registered with a Eureka. So my flight service also got registered with the Eureka. Now let us go to, so we should be able to access our flight service from API gateway as well, and we have kept it enabled so that we can access these services directly as well. So let us try to access this service directly first. So I have got multiple URIs I am exposing. So one of them is the flight number. Using the flight number I can access this flight, right? So if you remember that I have registered some flight details when it is starting, so I can fetch those flight numbers. I also have defined one active profile. What is the active profile, and some of the detail of the active profiles is also fetching. I can also fetch all the flights, like there are 111, 222, 333, 444 and 555. All these flights are already there. And similarly to this one, if you remember that, we also can access it using the 8761. So if I go and here, if I replace this with the 8765, I should be able to access it this way as well, right? If I go and check, it should be. And also I can add the new flight as well. If I want to add a new flight, I should be able to add a new flight as well. I can do it with this. So my new flight got added. The ID is 6 and flight number is this. So if I try to fetch this flight number, I should be able to fetch it. So now my flight got added again. So this is how we can deploy services. So this is now there are two more services, the passenger service and the ticket service. both the applications are very similar, and we will discuss that into the next lecture, and we will see how to create the manifest files. And thank you for watching this video.